People like her should know their place. Madison Whitmore stood over Maya Johnson, cake dripping from Maya's face onto the marble floor of the San Francisco Gala. The crowd of tech executives went silent, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. "Security!" Madison called out, her voice echoing through the ballroom. "This woman obviously doesn't belong here." Maya wiped chocolate from her glasses with a cloth napkin. She looked up at Madison calmly. She said nothing. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't even look angry. The other guests shifted uncomfortably, some pulling out phones to record the confrontation. Madison straightened her designer dress, satisfied. She'd handled this situation perfectly in front of everyone who mattered. But Madison had made one crucial mistake that would cost her everything. She had no idea who she was really talking to. Maya reached into her jacket and pulled out her phone. One call was about to change everything the Whitmore family had ever built. 3 hours earlier, Dr. Maya Johnson had walked through the gleaming lobby of the St. Regis with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged everywhere and felt the need to prove it nowhere. Her approach was deliberately understated. A simple black leather handbag, elegant but not flashy jewelry, and a professional demeanor that suggested competence without demanding attention. She was the senior vice president of Microsoft Azure, responsible for partnerships worth billions. But tonight she chose to blend into the background and observe. The first sign came at registration. The young woman behind the mahogany check-in table, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, looked at Maya's invitation with the kind of scrutiny typically reserved for counterfeit currency. "Maya Johnson," she repeated slowly, her finger trailing down the guest list with theatrical precision. "I'm sorry, I don't see you here." Maya waited patiently as the woman called over her supervisor, then another colleague. Behind her, a line of predominantly white tech executives moved through adjacent stations, with nothing more than a casual wave of their invitations. Gregory Steinberg, CEO of a mid-tier cloud services company, brushed past security with a hearty handshake and a joke about the Warriors' latest game. Jennifer Walsh, VP of engineering at a prominent startup, air-kissed the event coordinator like an old friend. "There seems to be some confusion with your invitation," the supervisor said, materializing beside the registration table with a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. He was middle-aged, professionally groomed, and spoke with the kind of careful enunciation people used when they wanted to sound important. "Do you have any additional identification? Perhaps your company badge?" Maya produced her Microsoft Azure business card with the same calm efficiency she used in board meetings. The supervisor studied it with the intensity of a forensic analyst, holding it up to the light as if checking for watermarks. "Microsoft Azure," he mused. "Are you here representing the Diversity and Inclusion Department?" "I'm here for the partnership announcement," Maya replied simply, her voice steady. She could have mentioned that she was the executive responsible for approving the very partnership announcement that would be made tonight. But something about the man's assumption intrigued her. How many other assumptions would people make before the evening was over? The registration process that should have taken 30 seconds stretched into 10 minutes. Maya watched as other guests, all of them white, most of them male, moved seamlessly into the cocktail reception. She observed the casual greetings, the way security guards nodded respectfully to familiar faces, the way the event staff anticipated needs before they were expressed. It was a masterclass in unconscious bias, playing out in real time. When she finally received her name tag, Maya noticed it listed her simply as Maya Johnson, Microsoft. Her official title, which would have immediately clarified her authority in the room, had been mysteriously omitted. Another small slight that spoke volumes about assumptions and expectations. As she entered the main ballroom, Maya felt the weight of calculated stares. Conversations paused as she passed, resumed in whispers after she moved on. She was one of perhaps 6 black professionals in a room of 200, and the only black woman in what appeared to be a leadership capacity. The isolation was deliberate, systemic, and familiar. She'd navigated rooms like this her entire career, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she was conducting an experiment in human nature, and the early results were fascinatingly predictable. Maya accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and positioned herself near the silent auction display. A perfect vantage point to observe the evening's dynamics. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick encrypted message to her assistant. Document everything from tonight's event. Full legal review. Then she settled in to watch the show, knowing that she was about to become both observer and participant in a lesson about power, perception, and the cost of assumptions. The interrogation began innocuously enough. Maya had been examining an auction item, a week at a Napa Valley vineyard donated by some tech mogul, when a small group of executives materialized around her like sharks drawn to blood in the water. Their leader was Harrison Caldwell, a man in his 50s with silver temples and the kind of confident bearing that came from never having his authority questioned. "I don't think we've been introduced," Caldwell said, extending his hand with the calculated charm of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Harrison Caldwell, CTO of Nexus Dynamics. And you are?" His eyes swept over Maya with the clinical assessment of someone determining her net worth, her usefulness, her right to exist in his stratosphere. "Maya Johnson," she replied, accepting his handshake with equal firmness. "Microsoft." "Microsoft," echoed James Forrester, a younger executive with the eager energy of someone still climbing ladders. "Which division?" "I have contacts throughout their HR department. Diversity and inclusion is such important work." The assumption landed like a paper cut. Small, precise, and surprisingly sharp, Maya's expression remained neutral as she corrected them. "Actually, I work in cloud infrastructure, Azure platform development, and strategic partnerships." The silence that followed was pregnant with skepticism. Caldwell's smile became more pronounced, taking on the patronizing quality of an adult humoring a child's elaborate fantasy. "Cloud infrastructure," he repeated slowly. "That's fascinating. What's your background? Business development?" "Computer science, MIT, then Stanford for my PhD in distributed systems," Maya replied evenly. She could have mentioned the 6 patents in her name, the papers she'd published, or the fact that she'd architected systems that processed more data in a day than most companies handled in a year. Instead, she watched their faces cycle through doubt, surprise, and then a more subtle form of dismissal. "PhD," Forrester said, with the kind of laugh that suggested he thought Maya was overselling herself. "From Stanford. That's quite impressive. What was your dissertation on?" The question came loaded with challenge, as if he were setting a trap for her to stumble into. Maya could feel the circle tightening as more executives drifted over, drawn by the scent of confrontation. "Optimizing distributed consensus algorithms for large-scale cloud computing environments," she answered with the precision of someone who defended her research before hostile academic committees far more intimidating than a group of tech bros at a cocktail party. "Distributed consensus," Caldwell repeated, his tone suggesting he was testing her knowledge. "So you're familiar with the Byzantine generals problem? Raft consensus? The practical implications of CAP theorem in real-world deployments?" Maya recognized the performance for what it was, a public quiz designed to expose her as an imposter. In her 15 years at Microsoft, she'd never seen a white male executive subjected to this kind of interrogation at a social event. "I've implemented solutions for all 3, she said simply. The Byzantine fault tolerance work was particularly interesting. We achieved 99.99% availability across distributed clusters spanning 4 continents. The technical specificity should have ended the conversation, but instead of backing down, the group doubled down. "That's fascinating," said Victoria Sterling, a venture capitalist who'd appeared at Maya's elbow with the stealth of a hunting cat. "I'm always impressed when people in support roles have such detailed technical knowledge. It really shows Microsoft's commitment to cross-training." Support roles. Maya felt something cold and sharp settle in her stomach. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message to her legal team. "Recording potential HR violations. Stand by." Then she looked up at the circle of faces around her, each one wearing the same expression of polite condescension, and made a decision that would change everything. "I appreciate your curiosity about my role," Maya said, her voice carrying a new edge that made several people step back slightly. "But I'm wondering, do you typically question male executives about their qualifications at social events? Or is this a special protocol you reserve for specific occasions?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Caldwell's face flushed slightly, but he recovered quickly. I think there might be some misunderstanding here. We're simply making conversation. Maya's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Of course you are. And I'm sure your colleagues Gregory Steinberg and Jennifer Walsh received the same thorough vetting when they arrived tonight. She gestured toward the two executives who had sailed through registration without a single question about their credentials or qualifications. The circle around her began to fracture as people realized the conversation had shifted from casual interrogation to something much more dangerous. Maya could see phones being pulled out, social media apps opening, the digital wildfire beginning to spark. This was no longer just a conversation. It was becoming a performance, and she was no longer willing to play the role they'd assigned her. Madison Whitmore arrived like a natural disaster, sudden, devastating, and impossible to ignore. Maya heard her before she saw her, the sharp click of Louboutin heels against marble, the cascade of laughter that followed her like a wake, and the subtle shift in the room's energy as conversations paused to acknowledge the presence of Silicon Valley royalty. What's this little gathering about? Madison asked, her voice cutting through the circle around Maya with the casual authority of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. She was striking in the way that money could make anyone striking, perfectly styled blonde hair that caught the light just so, a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and the kind of confident posture that came from never having been told no. Maya watched Madison's eyes sweep over her, cataloging details with the clinical precision of someone sizing up competition or threat. The assessment took perhaps 3 seconds, but Maya could read the entire calculation in Madison's expression. Black woman, professional attire, standing among her circle. The conclusion was swift and brutal. Oh, Madison said, her perfectly glossed lips curving into a smile that never reached her eyes. I didn't realize we were running a charity outreach program tonight. The comment landed like a slap, causing several people in the immediate vicinity to stop their conversations and turn toward the unfolding drama. Harrison Caldwell shifted uncomfortably. Madison, this is Maya Johnson from Microsoft. We were just discussing Microsoft's diversity initiatives, I'm sure, Madison interrupted, her gaze never leaving Maya's face. How wonderful that they're giving opportunities to people who might not otherwise have access to events like this. She gestured around the opulent ballroom with the casual dismissal of someone who'd grown up in such spaces. Maya felt the familiar burn of rage in her chest, but her voice remained steady. Actually, I'm here for the partnership announcement. Madison's laugh was like crystal breaking. Partnership announcement? Sweetie, this is an invite-only event for actual decision-makers. C-suite executives, board members, people who write the checks. She looked Maya up and down again, more slowly this time. I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding with your invitation. The crowd around them had grown larger, drawn by the scent of conflict and the presence of Madison Whitmore, whose family name carried weight throughout the tech industry. Maya could see phones being held at strategic angles, live streams beginning, social media posts being crafted in real time. The confrontation was becoming public entertainment. There's no misunderstanding, Maya replied calmly. I was invited by the event organizers to represent Microsoft's interests in tonight's announcements. Represent Microsoft's interests, Madison repeated mockingly. And what interests would those be? Making sure the catering staff has proper work visas? The cruelty in her voice was casual, practiced, as if she'd been sharpening these particular knives her entire life. Maya pulled out her business card and offered it to Madison with the same calm professionalism she used in hostile board meetings. I think there might be some confusion about my role. Madison took the card and glanced at it dismissively. Senior Vice President, she read aloud, her tone suggesting she was reading from a children's book. How impressive! Microsoft certainly has gotten creative with their titles lately. She held the card up to the light as if checking its authenticity. Though I suppose when you're filling quotas, you have to be flexible with traditional qualifications. The racial subtext had become text. Maya felt the collective intake of breath from the watching crowd, the sudden stillness that indicated everyone understood they were witnessing something that would have consequences far beyond this moment. She reached into her jacket and activated the recording app on her phone. then sent a quick message to Microsoft's general counsel. Document everything, hostile environment, potential legal implications. Ms. Whitmore, Maya said quietly, I understand you may not be familiar with seeing people like me in positions of authority, but I assure you, my qualifications and my invitation are both legitimate. Madison's face flushed with anger at the subtle challenge. People like you? She hissed. How dare you play the race card at a professional event? This has nothing to do with your skin color and everything to do with your obvious lack of class and breeding. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Maya watched Madison's face, saw the moment the younger woman realized she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, especially with dozens of phones recording every word. But instead of backing down, Madison doubled down with the reckless confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Security, Madison called out, her voice carrying across the ballroom. We have a situation here. This woman is obviously not supposed to be at this event. Maya didn't move as two security guards approached. Instead, she quietly typed another message to her team. Full documentation required. Prepare legal review and media response strategy. Then she looked up at Madison with a smile that held secrets the younger woman couldn't possibly imagine. Ms. Whitmore, Maya said softly, I think you should know that everything happening here tonight is being recorded and documented. Are you absolutely certain you want to continue down this path? But Madison Whitmore had never learned to recognize danger when it was standing right in front of her, offering her one last chance to step back from the cliff. These particular rules were designed to protect people who looked exactly like her, and she'd never lived in a world where those protections didn't apply. Tonight, she was about to discover what happened when those assumptions finally met reality. The confrontation metastasized through the ballroom like a social media virus jumping from device to device. What had begun as a whispered exchange between Maya and a small circle of executives had evolved into the evening's main attraction, with Madison Whitmore serving as both ringmaster and main performer in a circus that was rapidly spinning out of control. Madison's call for security had been the spark that ignited a powder keg of simmering tensions. Within minutes, her usual entourage had materialized around her like a protective barrier of privilege and entitlement. There was Chase Pemberton, heir to a media empire, and Madison's on-again, off-again boyfriend. Sloane Ashford, daughter of a Supreme Court justice, and Madison's closest friend since boarding school. And Tyler Brooks, a tech bro whose startup had been funded entirely by family money and Madison's connections. I can't believe they let just anyone into these events now, Sloane said loudly enough for half the ballroom to hear, her voice carrying the kind of cutting authority that came from generations of wealth and social position. Daddy always said that lowering standards would eventually catch up with Silicon Valley. Maya stood in the center of the expanding circle of hostility like the eye of a hurricane, her composure becoming more unsettling with each passing moment. She wasn't reacting the way victims were supposed to react, with tears, anger, or desperate attempts to prove her worth. Instead, she was watching, calculating, and quietly documenting everything with the precision of someone collecting evidence for a case that hadn't been filed yet. You know what I love about diversity hires? Tyler Brooks announced, clearly emboldened by the growing crowd and the apparent approval of Madison's inner circle. They always think they belong in rooms like this. It's actually kind of adorable. His comment drew nervous laughter from several tech executives who were too cowardly to speak up but too afraid of Madison's social influence to walk away. The crowd around the confrontation had swelled to nearly 50 people, creating a natural amphitheater with Maya at the center. Smartphones were held aloft like digital torches, live streams multiplying across platforms, hashtags already beginning to trend. Gala drama was gaining traction on Twitter, while TikTok videos were being shared and reshared with captions like entitled Heiress versus Microsoft employee and privilege on full display. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from her assistant. Legal team standing by. Media monitoring active. CEO's office has been notified. She glanced at the message, then looked up at Madison with a smile that made several people take an involuntary step backward. Ms. Whitmore, Maya said, her voice cutting through the crowd noise with surgical precision. Before this goes any further, I want to make sure you understand the potential implications of your actions tonight. Madison laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. Implications? What are you going to do, sue me? My family has more lawyers than Microsoft has employees. She gestured grandly at the crowd around them. Besides, everyone here can see exactly what's happening. You're trying to turn this into something it's not. And what is it, in your opinion? Maya asked calmly. A conversation about standards, Madison replied, her voice growing stronger as she sensed the crowd's attention. About maintaining the integrity of professional spaces, about ensuring that people who attend these events actually belong here. The racial subtext had become a megaphone announcement. Maya watched as several people in the crowd began to look uncomfortable, finally recognizing the ugliness of what they were witnessing. But Madison was too intoxicated by the attention, too convinced of her own invincibility, to notice the shifting mood. I think we should call this what it is, declared Victoria Sterling, the venture capitalist who had questioned Maya earlier. Corporate social responsibility gone too far. When companies prioritize optics over qualifications, this is what happens. Her comment drew approving nods from several other executives who had been looking for cover to voice their own prejudices. Maya pulled out her phone and began typing a message, her fingers moving with the speed and precision of someone who had composed similar messages before. The crowd watched her, some sensing that something significant was happening, but not understanding what. Madison saw the phone and laughed. Are you seriously texting right now? How unprofessional can you get? Madison shook her head dramatically. This is exactly what I'm talking about. No sense of appropriate behavior for professional settings. Maya finished her message and looked up, her dark eyes scanning the crowd with the intensity of a predator, identifying every member of a herd. Ms. Whitmore, I've just sent a message to my team requesting full documentation of tonight's events. Every word, every action, every witness. Are you certain you want to continue this conversation? Are you threatening me? Madison's voice rose with indignation. In front of all these witnesses? This is exactly the kind of aggressive behavior that proves my point. The crowd sensed blood in the water now, the confrontation reaching a fever pitch that promised either spectacular entertainment or spectacular consequences. Maya stood perfectly still in the center of it all, a calm focal point around which chaos swirled, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal exactly who had been threatening whom. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the message made her smile, a real smile, not the careful professional mask she'd been wearing all evening. She looked up at Madison, at the crowd of phones recording every moment, at the faces of people who had spent the evening assuming they knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. Ms. Whitmore, Maya said quietly, I think you're about to learn something very important about assumptions. The sound that cut through the ballroom wasn't Madison's voice or the murmur of the crowd. It was Maya's phone ringing with the distinctive tone she'd programmed for calls from Microsoft's executive leadership. The simple electronic melody seemed to freeze everyone in place, as if they sensed that whatever came next would change everything. Maya looked at the screen, saw the name that would end Madison Whitmore's world, and smiled. I need to take this, she said with the casual authority of someone who had never been afraid of important phone calls. She swiped to answer, and, instead of stepping away for privacy, touched the speaker button so her voice would carry across the now silent ballroom. Dr. Johnson, came the voice of Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, his tone warm but businesslike. I hope I'm not interrupting your evening, but the board has just concluded our emergency session regarding the Whitmore Technologies partnership. The name, Whitmore Technologies, hit the crowd like a physical force. Heads turned toward Madison, whose face had gone from flushed with anger to pale with dawning realization. Maya watched the younger woman's expression cycle through confusion, recognition, and the first cold touch of fear. Not at all, Mr. Nadella, Maya replied calmly, her eyes never leaving Madison's face. I'm actually with some of the Whitmore family representatives right now. Would you like me to put you on speaker so they can hear your decision? Actually, that would be perfect. Nadella's voice filled the space around them, carrying clearly to every corner of the silent crowd. Dr. Johnson, The board has voted unanimously to grant you full discretionary authority over the $4.2 billion infrastructure partnership with Whitmore Technologies. Whatever you decide tonight will be final and binding. Madison's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound like breaking dreams. The mathematical reality of what she was hearing hit her in waves. $4.2 billion, Microsoft, partnership, Maya Johnson, authority. The woman she'd been humiliating for the past 30 minutes controlled her family's entire future. "Thank you for the confidence, sir," Maya said into the phone, her voice steady as bedrock. "I've been conducting a thorough evaluation of Whitmore Technologies' corporate culture and leadership standards this evening. It's been very illuminating." Maya ended the call and slipped her phone back into her jacket with the same calm precision she'd maintained all evening. Then she reached into her other pocket and withdrew a business card. Not the simple Microsoft Azure card she'd shown Madison earlier, but her executive card with its full title and direct contact information. "Ms. Whitmore," Maya said, offering the card with a slight smile, "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Dr. Maya Johnson, Senior Vice President of Microsoft Azure, Chief Partnership Officer, and as of 30 seconds ago, the person with sole authority to approve or terminate your family's partnership with Microsoft." Madison stared at the card as if it were a snake that might bite her. Her mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound, her brain struggling to process the complete reversal of everything she thought she understood about the evening. Around them, the crowd had gone silent except for the soft sounds of dozens of people simultaneously opening social media apps and beginning to document the historic moment in real time. Within minutes, Whitmore Technologies stock would begin its catastrophic decline as news of the partnership termination spread across trading platforms and financial networks. "This can't be happening," Madison whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're nobody. You're just black," Maya suggested helpfully. "A woman? Not from the right family? Not wearing the right clothes? Not speaking with the right accent?" She stepped closer to Madison, lowering her voice so only the people in the immediate circle could hear. "Which assumption would you like to start with?" Tyler Brooks, who had been silent since the phone call, suddenly found his voice. "Madison, your dad needs to know about this right now. The stock price, the investors, the board meeting tomorrow." "The board meeting that was scheduled to ratify our partnership," Maya interrupted, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "The one where your father was planning to announce the largest cloud infrastructure deal in Whitmore Technologies history." She paused, looking around at the crowd of faces staring at her with a mixture of shock, fear, and dawning respect. "I want everyone here to understand something," Maya continued, her voice taking on the authority that came with controlling billions of dollars in corporate partnerships. "For the past hour, I've been documenting a masterclass in systemic discrimination. Not just personal prejudice, but the kind of institutional bias that creates hostile environments for people who don't fit a certain profile." Madison finally found her voice, though it came out as a desperate whisper. I didn't know who you were." Maya's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. "Ms. Whitmore, that's exactly the problem. You didn't know who I was, so you made assumptions based on what I looked like. You assumed I was less qualified, less important, less deserving of respect than everyone else in this room." She gestured toward the crowd of people now hanging on every word. "This wasn't personal bias," Maya continued, her voice growing stronger. "This was a demonstration of the exact corporate culture that Microsoft cannot and will not partner with. Every word, every action, every assumption has been documented and will be reviewed by our legal team, our board of directors, and our public relations department." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft chime of notifications as social media posts began to multiply and spread. Maya could see people in the crowd checking their phones, watching in real time as Gala drama evolved into Whitmore scandal and Microsoft partnership. Madison's legs seemed to give out slightly, and she reached for Chase's arm to steady herself. "My father," she said weakly. "Someone needs to call my father." Maya nodded sympathetically. "I'm sure he'll want to know that his daughter just cost the family business $4.2 billion. She looked around the ballroom one more time, taking in the faces of everyone who had witnessed Madison's performance. And I'm sure he'll want to know exactly how it happened. The collapse of Madison Whitmore's world began with a phone call that everyone in the ballroom could hear. At 10:47 p.m. Pacific Time, as Maya Johnson stood calmly in the center of the silent crowd, Madison's phone began ringing with a tone that made her face go even paler. The name on the screen read, "Dad, emergency line," and everyone watching knew that whatever conversation was about to happen would determine the fate of a multi-billion-dollar empire. Madison's hand shook as she answered the call, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daddy?" The voice of Robert Whitmore, CEO and founder of Whitmore Technologies, erupted from the phone with the force of a man watching his life's work crumble in real time. Even without speaker mode, his rage carried clearly across the ballroom. "What the hell have you done?" he roared, his voice cracking with strain. "I have 3 board members calling me. Our stock is in free fall, and Microsoft's legal team just sent us a formal notice of partnership termination for an $8.2 billion deal. What did you do?" Madison looked around desperately, as if searching for someone who might help her explain the unexplainable. Her eyes found Maya, who was watching the destruction with the calm interest of a scientist observing a chemical reaction. "Dad, I didn't know she was—" "She?" Robert Whitmore's voice reached a pitch that suggested either a heart attack or a complete nervous breakdown was imminent. "Are you telling me you attacked Maya Johnson? The Maya Johnson? The woman who controls our entire cloud infrastructure future?" The crowd pressed closer, drawn by the spectacle of watching 3 generations of Whitmore wealth and influence evaporate in real time. Social media platforms were exploding with live streams, videos, and commentary. Whitmore Down was trending on Twitter, while TikTok users were creating compilation videos of Madison's most damning quotes from the evening. "Madison," her father's voice continued, now dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than his shouting, "I need you to listen very carefully. You have approximately 15 minutes before this family loses everything. Everything. The house, the cars, the company, your trust fund, your future. All of it depends on what happens in the next 15 minutes. Maya stepped forward, her movement causing Madison to look up with eyes that held the kind of desperation usually reserved for natural disasters. "Ms. Whitmore," Maya said gently, "would you like me to speak with your father?" Madison nodded frantically, holding out her phone like a drowning person reaching for a life preserver. Maya accepted the device with the same calm professionalism she'd maintained all evening. "Mr. Whitmore," Maya said into the phone, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent ballroom, "this is Dr. Maya Johnson. I think we need to have a conversation about your company's corporate culture and its compatibility with Microsoft's partnership standards." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Robert Whitmore's voice returned, stripped of its earlier rage and replaced with the kind of careful control that came from recognizing imminent catastrophe. "Dr. Johnson, I apologize. I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "I'm afraid there hasn't been," Maya replied. "Your daughter has spent the evening providing a comprehensive demonstration of the exact values and behaviors that make Whitmore Technologies incompatible with Microsoft's partnership requirements. Everything has been documented, recorded, and witnessed by approximately 200 people." Around the ballroom, phones continued to record as Maya delivered what amounted to a corporate death sentence with the calm precision of a surgeon. The mathematical reality was stark. Whitmore Technologies derived 67% of its revenue from Microsoft partnerships. Without Microsoft, the company would be worthless within 6 months. "Dr. Johnson," Robert Whitmore's voice cracked with desperation, "surely we can find a way to resolve this. My daughter made a mistake, but the partnership, Maya interrupted, was contingent on cultural compatibility assessments that your daughter failed spectacularly tonight. Microsoft cannot partner with organizations that tolerate discrimination, harassment, or the kind of hostile environment I experienced this evening." Madison collapsed into a nearby chair, her perfect composure finally cracking as the full scope of the consequences hit her. Chase and Tyler stood frozen beside her, both intelligent enough to realize that their own social and professional futures were tied to the Whitmore family's rapidly sinking ship. Maya looked around the ballroom one final time, her gaze lingering on every face that had witnessed Madison's performance. "I want everyone here to understand something," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who controlled billions in corporate spending. "What happened tonight wasn't about personal conflict. It was about institutional change. Microsoft will not do business with companies that create hostile environments for people based on race, gender, or any other protected characteristic." The silence that followed was broken by the soft chime of Maya's phone receiving a text message. She glanced at it and smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she'd shown all evening. "That was our public relations team," she announced to the crowd. "Microsoft's official statement about the partnership termination will be released in approximately 10 minutes. I suggest everyone check their news feeds." Madison Whitmore, heiress to a technology empire, daughter of Silicon Valley royalty, and the woman who had started the evening by smashing cake into Maya Johnson's face, sat in her designer dress, surrounded by the wreckage of everything she'd thought was permanent and untouchable. The last thing she heard before the crowd began to disperse was Maya's calm voice making one final announcement. "Security will escort Ms. Whitmore out now. This is, as she predicted, the last time she'll be attending an event like this." 1 week after the St. Regis Gala, Dr. Maya Johnson sat in the gleaming Microsoft campus conference room that had become ground zero for what tech media was calling the Whitmore Reckoning. Across from her, 3 journalists from major publications waited with notebooks open and recording devices activated, ready to capture the first comprehensive interview with the woman who had, in a single evening, redefined corporate accountability in Silicon Valley. Maya had chosen this setting deliberately. The conference room overlooked the sprawling Microsoft campus where 47% of the engineering staff were people of color, where women held 38% of leadership positions, and where corporate culture was measured not just in profit margins, but in the daily experiences of every person who walked through the doors. This was what institutional change looked like when it was built intentionally, systematically, and with unwavering commitment. "Dr. Johnson," began Sarah Chen from the Wall Street Journal, "you've been praised as a hero for what happened at the gala, but you've also faced criticism for the severity of the consequences. Some are saying that terminating a $4 billion partnership was disproportionate to Madison Whitmore's actions. How do you respond to that?" Maya's response was measured, thoughtful, and carried the weight of someone who had spent a career navigating these exact conversations. "That criticism reveals exactly the problem we're trying to solve," she said. "People are comfortable calling what Madison did a mistake or poor judgment because they're not the ones who have to live with the daily reality of systemic discrimination." She leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on the passionate edge of someone who had found her purpose. What happened that night wasn't an isolated incident. It was a window into a corporate culture that tolerates and therefore perpetuates discrimination. When companies say they value diversity but partner with organizations that demonstrate the opposite values, they're perpetuating the very systems they claim to oppose. The second journalist, Marcus Thompson from TechCrunch, nodded as he scribbled notes. "But the ripple effects have been enormous. Whitmore Technologies has laid off over 3,000 employees. The family has lost their majority stake in the company, and Madison Whitmore herself is facing federal charges for civil rights violations. Don't you feel any responsibility for those consequences?" Maya's expression grew serious, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood that change was never without cost. "I feel profound responsibility for those 3,000 employees, which is exactly why we're launching the Microsoft Opportunity Fund next month. We're committing $50 million to support displaced Whitmore Technologies workers with retraining, job placement, and transition assistance." She paused, looking out the window at the campus where thousands of people were building the future of technology with dignity and respect for one another. "But I want to be clear about something. I didn't create those consequences. Madison Whitmore created them when she chose to demonstrate that her company's culture was incompatible with basic human dignity. I simply refuse to pretend that discrimination was acceptable if it came with a big enough check." The third journalist, Patricia Williams from Fortune magazine, leaned in with the kind of question that indicated she understood the broader implications of the story. This case has become a catalyst for policy changes across the tech industry. Microsoft announced new partnership evaluation criteria, Google implemented mandatory cultural assessments for all vendors, and Amazon created an entirely new department focused on corporate responsibility in their supply chain. Did you anticipate this level of systemic change? Maya's smile was the first unguarded expression she'd shown during the interview. I hoped for it, she admitted. But hoping and expecting are different things. What gives me the most pride isn't the punishment, it's the protection. In the past week, I've received over 2,000 messages from people sharing their own experiences with workplace discrimination. They're not asking for revenge. They're asking for systems that protect them before the damage is done. She reached for a folder on the table and pulled out a printed email. This is from a young black engineer at a startup in Austin. She wrote, Dr. Johnson, because of what you did, my CEO called an all-hands meeting to discuss our company values and created anonymous reporting systems for discrimination. For the first time since I started working here, I feel like someone is watching out for people like me. Maya looked at each journalist in turn, her voice growing stronger. That's what institutional change looks like. It's not about punishing bad actors, it's about creating systems where bad actions have immediate, meaningful consequences and where good behavior is rewarded and reinforced. Marcus Thompson looked up from his notes. What would you say to people who argue that you could have handled this differently? That you could have educated Madison Whitmore instead of destroying her family's company? Maya's response came without hesitation, carrying the authority of someone who had thought deeply about these questions. Education is a privilege that should be offered to people who demonstrate good faith and genuine remorse. Madison Whitmore showed neither. She escalated her behavior, even when given multiple opportunities to step back, and she did so in front of hundreds of witnesses and thousands of social media viewers. She leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. But more importantly, my job that night wasn't to educate Madison Whitmore. My job was to protect every person of color, every woman, every marginalized individual who might walk into a room like that in the future. Creating consequences for discrimination protects people. Accepting discrimination in the name of education perpetuates it. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, but Maya's core message remained constant. True leadership meant creating systems where dignity was non-negotiable, where power came with responsibility, and where the cost of discrimination was always higher than the cost of change. As the journalists packed up their equipment, Sarah Chen asked one final question. What's next for Dr. Maya Johnson? Maya's answer was immediate and certain. Building a world where what happened to me at that gala becomes so impossible, so unthinkable, that future generations will look back and wonder how we ever tolerated anything less than complete dignity for every person who walks into every room. The message that Dr. Maya Johnson wanted to leave with the world was simple, direct, and uncompromising. As she stood at the podium of the Microsoft Theater 3 weeks after the gala that changed everything, addressing an audience of tech leaders, civil rights advocates, and corporate executives, her final words carried the weight of someone who had transformed personal pain into institutional progress. The next time you witness discrimination in your workplace, your boardroom, or your social circle, you have a choice, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the packed auditorium. You can treat it as entertainment, as someone else's problem, or as an unfortunate but inevitable part of doing business. Or you can recognize it for what it actually is, a test of your own character and your own commitment to the values you claim to hold. She paused, looking out at faces that represented billions of dollars in corporate influence and thousands of hiring decisions that would shape careers and lives. Every person in this room has power. The power to hire, to fire, to promote, to partner, to invest, to speak up, or to stay silent. How you use that power in the moments when nobody is watching, when there are no cameras rolling, when it's easier to look the other way, that's who you really are. Maya's smile carried the confidence of someone who had faced the worst of human nature and emerged stronger. I want to leave you with a challenge and a promise. The challenge is this: examine your own assumptions. your own biases, your own role in systems that exclude or diminish people who don't look like you, think like you, or come from where you came from. And the promise is this: every time you choose courage over comfort, every time you choose justice over convenience, every time you use your power to protect someone who has less power than you do, you're not just changing their world, you're changing the world. As applause filled the theater, Maya delivered her final line with the timing of someone who understood exactly how powerful words could be when they were backed by action. Remember, dignity isn't negotiable, justice isn't optional, and leadership isn't about the size of your office or your bank account. True leadership is measured by how you treat people when you think nobody important is watching. She paused for one final moment, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Because you never know, that person you're dismissing, that voice you're ignoring, that talent you're overlooking might just be the one holding a $4 billion pen. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes. But Maya Johnson was already thinking about the next conversation, the next partnership, the next opportunity to prove that when power meets purpose, even the most entrenched systems can change overnight.